USAA knows dynamic duos can save the day, like superheroes and sidekicks or auto and home insurance. With USAA, you can bundle your auto and home and save up to 10%. Learn more and get a quote at USAA.com/bundle. Restrictions apply.
Now, it's Everything is Golden
on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
Here is your host, James Golden, a.k.a. Bo Snerdley.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is a first. This is the first time that we're doing Everything is Golden podcast on video. And I am so happy beyond words to introduce you to the guest of our inaugural video podcast, my friend, who I'm seeing for the first time. And this is Ed Shea. Now, Ed Shea and I have something in common. We both love Thom Bell. And I love the music that Thom Bell has produced, that Thom Bell has written, co-written, the entire movement of class that Thom Bell brought to R&B music and sophistication and beauty. And Ed Shea was a part of that. Ed, welcome. How are you?
I'm doing fine. Thanks, James. Good morning. And I'm honored to be here. And yeah, it took us about 3 years from that fateful morning during COVID when I'm always in bed under that electric blanket in January. And on your bumper music, you played something and you talked about Thom, and I jumped out of bed. I thought, oh my God, this guy, well, you always were very aware of the R&B from all your bumper music that I listened to. And even till last week when you mentioned Chubby Checker, and I texted you, I said, you know, when Thom was a staff arranger at Cameo Parkway Records, which was the Bobby Rydell era, Fabian, you know, Thom actually started there in the mailroom. So then he became a staff arranger. And then, you know, he went on tour with Chubby Checker. So, yeah, we have a love of Thom. We have a love of R&B. And it's just been a fantastic journey, as short as it was with Thom. He was sort of an enigma. And I remember you would said, Ed, stay on the line. Give my screen caller your information because you wanted to do an interview with Thom. And I said, he's a very private guy. And being at his home, I was at both of his homes in Seattle when I was touring with Musical, in Puyallup, Washington, and then in Bellingham, which is about an hour north of Seattle. And when I went to his home, James, you wouldn't even know this guy was a musician. There was not a piano, not a gold record. I said, Thom, where's all your awards? Oh, no, Mr. O'Shea. I'm not into those. He gave all those awards out to his grandchildren and his children. He was just into making music. And in the studio, we had a lot of fun. There was never any anxiety. And again, it was really a cumulative effort from all the guys. With Gamble and Huff, I would go in there, and Leon Huff may say, you know, I would like that violin part doubled on orchestra bells. Well, there was no music, so I would ask him to play it on the keyboard. I would scratch it out. So I learned from going in with anything with Kenny Gamble or Leon Huff to bring a manuscript book, and I'd have to write it down. It isn't like I have perfect pitch and I can just say, oh. So with Thom, everything was copied, beautifully copied, but yet he would give us the freedom, like Bobby Eli, to put in effects on the guitar. Or if I said, hey, Thom, on It's Your Conscience, it was like a Brazilian type of thing on the Denise Williams album. I said, I think Shaker would work and maybe overdubbing a triangle. Let's give it a shot. So he was always open to whatever well, let's put it this way. We trusted each other. He trusted us. That's why we were his guys. But the original, I guess, sound of Philadelphia goes way back before Thom, even before the Delphonics with Earl Young and Lenny Pakula and Norman Harris and Larry Washington. They go as far back. I don't know if you're going to remember this hit from like 1968 called The Horse. Cliff Noble.
By Cliff Noble. Noble.
That's all the Philly guys prior to Thom Bell. And it's funny, you know, Thom, a lot of biographies say that he was born in Philadelphia. Tom was not born
He was
in
born in
Philadelphia.
Kingston,
He was
Jamaica.
born in King. He came to Philly in his early, like 3 or 4 years old, and they
4 years
sent
old
him
with
to
his
West-
parents, right?
Right. His mom was a concert pianist, but she worked at the University of Penn dealing with exchange students. So a lot of times she would bring these exchange students home. They were from Africa, from here. So, they brought with them this culture and the music. And Tom's dad played a little bit of accordion and guitar. And he came from 10 brothers and sisters. His twin sister used to date Kenny Gamble. So they met. Right. So Kenny Gamble and Tom had a duo called Kenny and Tommy, which never happened. And then they changed their name to the Romeos. And eventually, Gamble and Huff became real big. But, James, with the sound of Philadelphia, I always think it takes a backseat to, you talk about L.A., the Wrecking Crew, Hal Blaine, Carol Kay, all those great musicians. You have, of course, Muscle Shoals. You had Memphis Horns. You had Chess Records out of Chicago.
Out of Chicago.
Yeah.
Yes, indeed. With Maurice White and that crew also. That's when Maurice White was a working drummer before anybody even knew who he was.
Well, if you listen to I'm In With the In Crowd, remember Ramsey Lewis?
Yes, with Ramsey Lewis, the In Crowd record.
Right.
That's Ramsey, that's right.
So I always think that Philly International always never got the recognition as like a Berry Gordy, and I think they took off where Motown stopped. Not that they stopped, but I don't know if you know the name Fred Wesley. He used to be with the James Brown.
Fred Wesley with the James Brown. He's a trombone player.
Trombone player. Fred used to say about Philly International, he says, it's funk with a bow tie. It's funk wearing a bow tie. And even like Tom, some of the interviewers would say to Tom, Tom, why don't you get dressed up in these big hats and the platform shoes? Because in Philadelphia, the Afro-American would go to these clubs and they'd be dancing, and this was a time for them to shine. They just loved the music. And I remember it now, those early Delphonics, I'm in high school now. I'm in North Catholic High School in Philadelphia, but this stuff grabbed me. But growing up, I was a big Chubby Checker fan, Bobby Rydell, all that. Dee Dee Sharp. Did you know that Dee Dee?
Of course, Dee Dee Sharp, related Dee Dee Sharp Gamble, yes.
Right. And, and of course, the Locomotion. So a lot of those guys came up through Cameo Parkway. My teacher, Nick D'Amico, who I studied with, did some of the early dates. And Vince Montana, who was a member of the Philly International Sound, he went on the discover South Soul Records. He was in New York shopping like this Latin thing with a funk groove there were 3 brothers up there. So Vince came up with the name South Soul, like salsa with funk. So, and there were some great records that Vince did. And full disclosure, Vince did a lot of the early Thom Bell stuff. I came on, I think, after Tom and Vince had a little bit of a tiff over, Vince maybe claiming, this was his idea. And Tom was a no-nonsense guy. There was no smoking in the studio and absolutely no drugs. Not that we do any drugs, but later on, I'll tell you about the 4 days that we did with Gato Barbieri and why it was a complete disaster. Let's put it this way. There was a lot of snow in that month of May at Sigma.
Okay, then.
Yeah. But Gato, so we did 4 days with Gato. And if Tom wanted, if it was a ballad type of thing, Gato wanted an up-tempo thing. If it was an up-tempo thing, he wanted it really laid back. And all those tunes are still in the can. And speaking with Bill Neal, the guitarist who did a lot of Tom's stuff, Bill says, Ed, I still have tapes from whatever that was, 1983. And it just, so things didn't work out with Gato. They were beautiful tracks. But yet, even with Denise Williams doing those 2 great albums, I think Tom told me Denise, he let her co-produce those albums. And he told me he really wasn't into a co-producer, but he acquiesced, and they had a great, relationship for those 2 albums. I always thought there'd be more. And the last time I saw Denise is when I did an A&E special in the late 90s at Sony Studios in New York with Johnny Mathis. and Denise was there. Of course, they sang Too Much, Too Little, Too Late.
Right.
And she was a sweetheart. I mean, all the people, very rarely would we have an artist in the studio. I mean, I remember Teddy Pendergast being in the studio, Denise, Lou Rawls, but the Stylistics, the Temptations, the OJs, I usually went in there and I was either overdubbing or playing live with a rhythm section. We never did everything live with a full orchestra. But yet, I know in the early days, Thom told me when he did the Delphonics, they would use a full orchestra because that was something called Philly Groove Records. And the head
that
of
little red label, the Philly Groove. Yes.
A guy named Stan Watson, and he liked everything live. And I think, well, as a drummer percussionist, if I was going to play with a big band, I really like to hear what the brass are doing, because if you're reading a drum chart and you're setting up some big band licks and there's nothing there, it's a little weird, you know. It's like it's a one-way conversation. But Thom, we usually do all of the rhythm tracks, then the strings and the horns, and finally the vocals. So getting back to how I met Thom, so 1976, Atlantic City gets gambling. So I leave the Philly area. I'm doing like the theaters in Philly. I'm teaching privately at my mom's house, and I'm living in this little motel in Brigantine, New Jersey, like $150 a month. So I'm down there, and you have to put in your residency because there were guys down there who lived there, and they just didn't want guys coming in. And that's the way it was with LA or New York. You had to put in a 6-month. So around in March, I moved down in November. Around in March, Don Ronaldo. If you look at 99% of the Philly things, you'll see strings contracted, Don Ronaldo. So Don was this real gruff South Philly guy. So I get a call. One of the guys at the Golden Dolphin Motel, we had about 15 guys there, hoping to be big casino showroom musicians when it happened. Don Ronaldo calls on one of the landlines that one of the guys put in. Shea, I got a date for you. Thom Bell, you better do good. So I'm thinking, oh my God, if I leave Brigantine and somebody finds out I did work out of the area, I'm going to lose my 4 months that I already put in. So I asked the union if I could go up. They gave me an okay. And the first album that I did with Thom was the OJ's, Identified.
Oh, yeah, baby.
So I did 2 or 3 tracks, and it was timpani and marimba. And James, usually with percussion, there was a cartage company. They would rent stuff. I was so naive. I got my station wagon, my Plymouth Satellite Region station wagon, somehow crammed my 2 timpani in the car. I took them in and went up. This was at 309 South Broad Street, like on the 3rd floor. I went in there. I'm very nervous. And Thom Bell, the first thing, he introduces himself and he apologizes because the marimba part was written in bass clef, which is no problem as long as it's not all over the place. So I played that down. I did a couple overdubs on timpani, and we just hit it off, and he was the nicest, kindest guy. And I think with the pictures I sent you a letter that Thom sent me, thanking me for my work on the OJ sessions, and I'll be seeing you for the Fish movie. So the next big thing was in July, the Fish That Saved Pittsburgh. So now you got to remember, so we're booked for 6 days. Monday through Saturday. And in fact, Bob Babbitt, Charles Collins, Larry Washington, and Thom's brother, Tony Bell, was on it. This first time and the last time I ever saw or met Tony Bell, his brother. He played guitar with Bobby Eli. So now remember, I'm collecting like $150 a month unemployment. I may have done a couple jobs in Atlantic City, like Jerry Vale at the convention hall. So we do these 6 days of the Fish movie, which was a big flop, but musically.
Well, hold up the cover so everybody can see it. And I remember when this record came out, I was at WWRL in New York as a music researcher when that record came out. That record did not do well at all.
No, but so we get booked and Thom paid us double scale. The rhythm guys. So we're booked for 6 days. We finish it in 5. He still pays us for the 6th day. That night, Caesars opened in Atlantic City. I'm working John Davidson. So I'm going from working like with the Silvers, or there were so many artists. Holy smokes. Loretta Lynn. Doc Severinsen did a thing. And So that week, I think I made over $7,000. Now, I'm not saying that to brag, but I'm just saying how crazy the business is.
Yeah.
I made more in that week because of Tom and working the shows at night at Caesars than I did the whole first 7 months because I'm on unemployment. And I couldn't be happier. I had a guitarist living with me, Tom Jacobetti, a fine guitarist out of Philly. You know, we're practicing. We had all the time in the world. So we did this Fish movie. And, of course, the record was a flop. But some of the great tunes, there's a tune on here, Magic Mona, Casey James, sung by Phyllis Hyman. I'm telling you, James.
Oh, Phyllis Hyman. Oh, my gosh.
Yeah. Now, we did Phyllis Hyman at the old Sigma in New York City in the Ed Sullivan building in the 80s. Now, that's where that building was empty. Again, Ed Sullivan, it looked like a ghetto, New York. 42nd Street was pouring houses.
Right.
Terrible. So even the building where the Sullivan building was in, and, of course, Letterman. So we go up to the 7th floor, and we did 3 days of recording with Phyllis Hyman, and it was great. It was great stuff. So we did 4 tracks or 5 tracks, and on Michael Narada Walden produced the other half of the album in San Francisco.
Okay, yeah. You're a drummer. Talk to me for 1 second. Just a slight detour about Michael Narada Walden.
Yeah. Well, go ahead. You have a story?
No, I'm just saying, this guy, I first saw him live. I went with my friend Omar Hakim, the drummer.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, okay, Omar and I grew up together. We're like brothers.
Yeah.
So I went with Omar to SIR, and John McLaughlin and Narada Mahavishnu Orchestra was rehearsing. Yeah. And that's the first time I saw Michael Narada Walden playing live. What can you say?
Well, I had the honor and the opportunity of working with him at the NJ Pack Center in Newark. We were doing a big benefit for a hospital, and it was Aretha Franklin. Oh. It was funny. She brought in 2 drummers. She brought a girl in from Detroit that actually played with Michael McDonald, I forget her name, and Michael Narada Walden. And he was in this cowboy hat with glitter. I mean, we're in tuxes, you know. We look like we're playing like, the Ed Shea wedding, tuxes with the ruffled shirts. And Michael came in, and his arms were as big as my thighs. And a sweetheart. I said, hey, Michael, I said, I'm on the honor of, I have the honor of being on the same Phyllis Hyman album as you. You did 4 tracks that you produced and played on in San Francisco. I said, I did the same with Thom Bell in New York. And he pinched my cheek. He says, that's very nice, honey. That's very nice. He was a spiritual guy, beautiful guy. And Phyllis Hyman, it's a sad story.
I know.
And a beautiful woman. She was on Broadway with sophisticated ladies. Absolute stunning lady. And again, if you listen, I had to dig up some of the stuff, James, because...
Is that you playing on Somewhere in My Lifetime with her? Do you remember that one?
This is the album we did.
Okay.
So I would have to look. I can't even keep track. But, it's funny how I'm looking at this.
I'm looking at these records you have here. I see the Nisi album.
Yeah.
And you did that Nisi album. That was a very big hit for her.
This one?
That one. And then the Nisi album that you have behind you did well for her, too.
Yeah. This, of course, we had a big hit with with Going to Take a Miracle.
It's Going to Take a Miracle. She did that.
I remember we did that.
That was huge for her.
2 takes. And the only drag about this album is they spelled my name wrong. They made me a Protestant, S-H-A-Y. But I look, James, and like this album, I don't even remember doing some of these things. And I did things with, not with Tom, but with, the Futures, Archie Bell and the Drells. And,
God.
Time goes on, and, I'm worrying about paying the electric bill. I can't, but I also wanted to talk about the rhythm section that I worked with. So again, you had the first rhythm section of Earl Young.
Okay, well, wait. Before we do that, I want to talk about that. But before we do that, we haven't even talked about how you came to be Ed Shea. How did you start? You play everything. You're not just a percussionist. You play drums. You play Tiffany. You play vibes. You are a total percussionist, not just a limited percussionist.
Well, here's the thing you can take to your friends. What's the difference between a percussionist and a drummer?
You tell me.
About $35,000 a year. Meaning usually a percussionist will have a lot of doubles. If you're playing timpani, vibes, and hand percussion. Well, it started for me, James, was my grandfather had a bar on the Jersey Shore outside of Cape May and Wildwood, New Jersey, on the Delaware Bay called the Miami Beach Inn. And every summer, we had a family home there from Philadelphia. We're going to the shore. So my granddad had this bar, and he would have bar bands in the summertime. And I was just enamored with, like a gold sparkle set of Ludwig drums and the cymbals. And, my dad would let me sit there. He would help my granddad bartend. So that was the seed. And luckily, when I went to high school, I had a great band director that saw my talent. And I played my first musical at North Catholic called Do Re Mi. There was one big hit from that show called Make Somebody Happy, or Make Someone Happy. So he said, look, if you want to be a show drummer, you got to get with this guy, Nick D'Amico. You got to study mallet percussion, timpani, all the toys, hand percussion, because that's what you want to do. Because a lot of the acts, when I was a house drummer at the Latin Casino, I generally would just play the opening act, because when you were working people like Sinatra, Tom Jones, John Davis and Sammy, back in the day, they all brought their own rhythm section. So I would be back playing percussion. And of course, working with Sinatra, I could be talking to Irv Kotler and ask him, well, how'd you do that? How'd you do this? So I had a great high school program that sort of was my template for my life. I knew what I wanted to do when I was 14 or 15. It's like, man, I want to be a show player. So now I get into college, the Music Academy in Philly, the Philadelphia Musical Academy. And a lot of those teachers there were doing Sigma dates, Richie Genovese and, all the Italians. It was like the mafia, like it was all Italian in Philadelphia. And of course, I'm hearing, I'm working now at the Latin Casino. I'm working the Valley Forge Music Fair. I'm doing the Ice Capades, Disney on Parade, things that don't even exist nowadays. So that was my thing. And then when, again, Atlantic City got gambling, I thought, wow, this is going to be like Las Vegas of the East. And it was for a minute. And so I really think the turning point was, if I didn't go to North Catholic and had Tony Marchione as a band director, I really wonder what would have happened if I because some of these schools don't have much of a music program.
At all anymore, right?
Yes. No. So I went to school with some great, I don't know if you know the name Bobby Malik, a tenor player that's just a heavy, a Tony Vigilante, a great drummer who's now in Florida, down in the Fort Myers, Naples area, that just sort of owns that area, playing with great players. Joe Nero, who was the guy in Philadelphia. So I was very fortunate to have good friends, even to this day, that, became part of my life and are still part of my life. So at 75, I'm still hanging in there. I'm still,
You're out playing with Mathis when Johnny Mathis is out. Talk to us about Mathis for a quick second. Playing with Johnny. Look, you mentioned so many names that you have either played with, the Frank Sinatras, Sammy Davis Jr. These people are just, first of all, Frank Sinatra, to me, I love the man so much, not just because of the music, but for what he did as a human being, opening up the door for especially Black musicians, and he would not take crap or let them take crap if they were working with him. There's a whole other side to Frank Sinatra when people were anti-Semitic, wouldn't stand for the anti-Semitism, wouldn't stand for the racism. You look at who he worked with. A young Quincy Jones is his arranger. He's working with Count Basie, that famous record he did at the Sands. He acknowledges Black artists. at a time when he did not have to do any of that.
Well, look at Sammy appearing in Las Vegas. He had to live like in West Las Vegas, like in a ghetto. And like if Sammy went in the pool, they would empty it. So Frank says, hey, if he's not allowed in the hotel, sayonara, I'm not working here. So yeah, he really took a stand. And I know he was heartbroken when JFK, when they didn't want Sammy at the inaugural because he was dating Mae Britt, the famous Swedish actress.
Right.
And Frank was livid. But yeah, Frank opened up a lot of doors. And even, you know, when I go into Atlantic City still to work with John, who I'll speak with, you know, when I pass the Atlantic City Medical Building across the street from Bally's or the Claridge, there it is, Frank Sinatra wing. He donated millions of dollars, and he's helped so many people. And do you know, when Sammy lost his eye in that car accident, when he was going from Vegas to L.A., he told the hospital, the bill's covered. Whatever it is, you know, Frank would cover whatever bill Sammy had. He was a wonderful human being. Now I want to get back to John. So now I'm in the Music Academy. I'm in my 4th year of a 5-year program. I remember I got a haircut this beautiful May day. And my mother says, oh, Lou Krause, the contractor, called from the Latin Casino, Johnny Mathis. Oh, my God. So, again, my station wagon, I get the timpani in, you know, and the vibes. And so I'm like 20 years old working with John, and I remind John about this. This is probably 1970. No, this is my 2nd year of college, and we used to do 2 shows a night at the Latin Casino. Was 7 nights a week. We'd do 8 and 11, 8 and 11. Sundays we do like 5 and 8. So we would do 14 shows in a week, and I worked with John. And I remember the drummer that was with John at the time, a guy out of Indianapolis, out of Bloomington, where the famous School of Music is in Indiana, Jack Guilfoyle. And he just put me at ease. He says, man, you sound great. I'd love to hear you in 10 years. Well, 10 years later, I'm working with Henry Mancini.
Oh, my gosh.
Who's playing drums? Jack Guilfoyle. Abraham Laboriel on bass. I don't know.
Oh, my gosh.
Well, of course, his son was playing drums years later with Paul McCartney. So here I am working with Mancini. And so it's funny, all the connections. So now I go to Atlantic City in 76. I start working with John again. He has a wonderful conductor, Scott Lavender. Scott loved what I did with the book. So when we would do Vegas or the West Coast or Boston all the way down to Washington, I got to have Ed Shea. So Scott was very gracious in requesting me. And John, I'm telling you, James, you couldn't meet a nicer human being than Johnny. I mean, he's done so many nice things. Like if I had guests backstage, I said, John, would you mind? Oh, no, posing for pictures. My partner, Mary, her Aunt Lee was, near death a couple of years ago, May. So we said, John, could we do a video of you wishing Aunt Lee, like, good wishes? And he took the time out. He said, Aunt Lee, I hope you feel better. And, we got to do a show tonight. I'll be thinking of you. He was gracious. So at 89, listen, we're all failing a little bit. John may have a memory loss, but once he gets those first 2 words on the tune, he's off and running. And it's James, it's magic. When we're doing the Mancini medley and I'm just listening to the rhythm section play 2 for the Road with the beautiful strings and harp on my right, man, I just get goosebumps. And I can remember being on the beach in Wildwood with my dad, would have this Silvertone AM radio from Sears, listening to Johnny Mathis and, Pat Boone. And here I am having dinner with him. Just a wonderful guy. And, of course, Thom did a great couple albums with John in 74. He did that tune, I'm Coming Home. Again, like a little Brazilian.
I'm Coming Home, which he did on that album. He did a rearrangement of Stop, Look, and Listen with Johnny Mathis that is classic.
Yeah. Well, we used to do that. We used to do that with John. We're still doing a couple tunes with John, which I'll show you. But Johnny was a great guy. Other great acts, Burt Bacharach and Dionne Warwick. Now, Dionne can be she can be a little fussy. I was with her at Valley Forge Music Fair where she fired the whole band. I don't know why, except for the strings and the percussion. And she brought in a great drummer with us, a guy named Ray Lucas, who was a jazz drummer. And I think I worked with Ray in Atlantic City with Nancy Wilson. So
you worked with Nancy Wilson too?
Yeah. And her conductor was the guy that used to do the Arsenio Hall show. I forget his name, but I would see him in Arsenio like as his MD when that show was running. But Bert was a very finicky guy. That was his music. He wanted it played. I know he would drive the brass players crazy with it's too long, it's too short, not long enough. I love Bert. I loved him. And
you're talking about the syncopation. He wanted to just. What do you mean? It's too long?
Okay.
He wanted to hear everything.
This guy's in love with you. That tune.
Right.
So the horns would be playing. Ba 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 ba. Too long, guys. Ba ba ba. Too short, and it would drive guys. And I know, but he was really into it. I remember once we did a date at Caesars in Atlantic City. We did the first night. The second night, the curtains closed. He came back and he sort of reamed out the orchestra. He said, look, I was very disappointed in last night's performance. I know it can be better. I know you're better than this. I mean, he was very nice about it. But he had ears like Thom. Nothing went by him. So I know over the years, different percussionists have worked with Bert in like Las Vegas and, Westbury Music Fair. And he had a hit medley. And one of them, let me see if I have this here. One of the tunes was, The Look of Love, right?
Oh, yes.
Yeah, and it called for a gourd or a shaker. So it was 2 quarter notes. 1, 2, bop. So from that first quarter note to the second note was this type of thing, which means a crescendo. Now, if you have one of these little scratchers, you're not going to be able to make the length. So I bought this crazy thing when I was in Pueblo, Mexico, when I graduated from college. So now we get to the medley, the hits, and now it's coming up, The Look of Love. Even my teacher told me, Ed, because Nick worked with Bert for a week at the Forest Theater. He says, man. So I'm ready for him. So we get to The Look of Love. Bert throws the downbeat. The look, then it went on. I thought he was going to come up and kiss me on the cheek. I said, Bert, I've been waiting 22 years to use this. 22 years. And he laughed, but that was it. You needed that length. And then the guitar would come in. Joan.
Oh, wow.
But you know what? I'd rather work with a guy like that who, like I said, he was very nice, but he knew what he wanted.
This message is brought to you by Abercrombie Kids, your place to shop everything they need for a summer full of memories. Kids can never have too many shorts and tees, and Abercrombie Kids has endless options. Planning a water park or beach trip? Get them new swim with next-level comfort. Summer's calling. Answer with Abercrombie Kids. Shop in-store, online, or in the app.
Have you ever spotted McDonald's hot, crispy fries right as they're being scooped into the carton? And time just stands still. Ba-da-ba-ba-ba.
Here at the Almond Joy Factory, where tropical vibes abound, we use soft, fresh-tasting coconut.
The crunchiest almonds and delicious chocolate candy.
Ah, but do you know what our most important ingredient is? Sometimes you feel like a nut.
Sometimes you don't.
Almond Joy's got nuts and something even way better than that. Yes, Almond Joy is made with almonds and joy.
This episode is brought to you by Temptations Cat Treats. Your cat will come running for the perfectly irresistible Temptations Creamy Puree and Temptations Lickable Spoon Cat Treats. The best time to feed lickable cat treats to your cat is anytime. Feed by hand for a playful moment, in a bowl for a creamy treat, or as a topper to make mealtime fun. Visit TemptationsTreats.com to learn more.
This is something I learned with Omar, and I won't mention the artist's name because this is not my story and I don't have permission to do it. But he talks about, he told me about being in a recording session with a very, very well-known female artist who has a reputation of being a diva, quote unquote. Mm-hmm. And what he said to me was, because I asked him about it, he said, she is not a diva. She is a perfectionist. This is her music, and she wants it right.
Yeah.
And so if she asked me to go in and do something for 20, 30 takes before it sounds right to her ear, I don't have a problem with that.
Yeah.
I understand perfectionism. And that's what people at a certain, when you're working with people that have that and you respect that, it's not a problem. And it sounds like that's, I mean, look at you. You've been waiting 20 years.
Yeah.
But you're ready. You have this.
Yeah. I couldn't wait to get to that.
And you deliver.
I couldn't wait to get to that hits medley with all his hits. Because I thought, and I said, Bert, 20 years I've been waiting for that. So Bert was great. Dionne, and again, that was a great duo because here's Dionne singing. And Bert, he looked like an eagle, like conducting. He was hunched over the piano. And again, he would come to rehearsal. He'd have his tennis sweater around his neck. And I just thought he was the hippest guy in the world. And, when he sang his hits, it was almost, is he going to make these pitches? He would sing just about make it, but it was wonderful. And of course,
those songs are forever songs. They are still beautiful. Dionne Warwick's performance on those songs, the recording of those songs,
yes,
they all have stood the test of time. They don't sound dated.
I agree. Just like listening to Thom stuff.
Just like Thom stuff. You can listen to it like it was recorded yesterday.
Yeah. Or even, anything, the Muscle Shoals, like Aretha and Smokey Robinson. When I hear Love Machine, I think, man, it's funky, it's grooving. And,
Now, Love Machine was after Smokey left the group. That's Bill Griffin.
That's the Miracles, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, but great stuff. And, so some of those acts, Frank Sinatra Jr., I never played with Frank where the place wasn't packed. Very knowledgeable guy, went to the Berklee School of Music. And Frank was, I wouldn't say pompous, he was a little stiff. And I remember telling him a story. I said, hey, Frank, when my mother worked at Zaber's restaurant in North Wildwood as a waitress and you were working at the surf club, I picked my mom up in my 57 Chevy. She says, do you want to see Frank Sinatra Jr.? Mom, that's great. So she took me to the surf club and the drummer Tommy Check was playing. It was a self-contained 10-piece band. I was in heaven. So fast forward about 30 years later, I said, hey, Frank, I just wanted to tell you, when you were working in Wildwood, like in the 60s at the surf club, when you were traveling, my mom took me to see the show and Tommy Check was playing drums and I went on to work with Steve and Edie with Tommy on drums. And it was like nothing. It was like, but really a great guy. And I knew he appreciated what I did on percussion because his drummer, Bob Kamel, would say, Ed, when Frank looks up there and sees you in Atlantic City or Westbury or Foxwoods, he knows the parts are going to be played. So, you sort of got to be a chameleon in the business. I don't care, like Omar, if he's going to be playing with some big act like Streisand, it's going to be, he's there to serve the artist. It's not about us. It's not about me being fancy behind John. If something doesn't work or I get too busy, maybe John's drummer would say, hey, Ed, maybe we're not going to use, maybe don't play shaker there, or the conductor. So again, it's the artist that we're serving, unless, of course, you're playing in a jazz club and, people are trading 16 bars, Yeah. So, the acts it's been a great experience. James, that doesn't exist anymore. Once Johnny goes, after Tony Bennett went, there's no more like supper clubs, nightclubs. You have Michael Bublé out there doing the Sinatra book. I work with a guy named Michael Martucci who does the Sinatra book and uses like about a 18-piece big band minus the strings. But that era is done. It's done.
Wow.
And now getting back to Thom, I'd just like to spend a couple minutes with the guys that I work with. So you had Charles Collins, the drummer, who came out of Chicago. And Charles did a lot of dates with Thom. And I think Charles' most iconic drum thing is he did the Lou Rawls, You'll Never Find, when you hear that.
You'll never find another love like mine.
Yeah, and I said, Charles, that drum beat to me, I said, that is about as iconic as Steve Gadd, 50 Ways to Leave Your Lover. As soon as you hear that opening thing, it's Charles. So Charles was big, and then you had Bobby Eli, who did a million dates. And he wrote Love Won't Let Me Wait. And, Bobby used to say in the studio with all of Thom's, rhythmic changes, again, like Thom, they used to call him like the Black Burt Bacharach, because Burt would have all these time changes. You never felt it as a listener, but Bobby Eli would say, man, you need 3 legs to dance to your stuff, Thom. So Bobby was a big influence, and it's a shame he's not alive, because James, you could interview him for 3 hours. He's like an encyclopedia. Bobby was a great guy. I recorded with him, and I did an album with Bobby. I don't know if you know this artist, Jackie Moore.
No, I'm not familiar with Jackie Moore.
Yeah, and she had a great rhythm section out of Baltimore called Pockets. So Bobby did.
Oh, I know Pockets.
Yeah.
Pockets. Verdine from Earth, Wind, and Fire was involved with Pockets. I think.
Really? Wow. Yeah, that's fantastic. But
I think so. It was one group. I believe it was Pockets. I could be mistaken about that.
And there were a couple brothers in that group. I remember the last name was Granger, Gary Granger, and of course you had Bill Neal, the guitarist. Now Bill met Thom Bell at the Latin Casino. Bill's traveling with the Temptations. Thom Bell comes into the Latin Casino to check out the room because they're going to do a live, I think, Spinners album. So Maurice King was the conductor for all these Detroit acts. So Maurice King introduced Bill to Thom, and, they're at the Latin for a week. And Bill's a Camden, New Jersey guy right across the river. He went in and hung with Thom for like a week, and Thom started using him. So, and then you had George Merrill. He met Thom in Seattle. Thom lived out that way, and Thom would mix some of this stuff at the old K. Smith Studios. And George told me he was down the hall doing his thing, and he met Thom, and Thom would bring him in for the Niecy albums, Phyllis Hyman. Now, I don't know, you probably don't know the name George Merrill, but if I tell you what he did years later, you're going to go, oh my God. So I'm going to mention 2 tunes. I Want to Dance with Somebody and How Will I Know? Whitney Houston. George Merrill wrote those tunes.
OMG.
Yeah, and he was like a student of Thom Bell. Thom would help him. And I spoke with George, and I guess he's doing well, because after I spoke with him a half an hour and said, I'm going to be talking with James Golden, if you have any background stories, he says, well, Ed, I'm in London right now. Oh, my. So I guess he lives in London 6 months and then north of San Francisco. And him and his partner, Shannon Rubicam, wrote 2 of those tunes, of course, and many more, but they're the 2 big hits. The other guy you have is Larry Washington. Well, first of all, Thom had a nickname for everybody. I was Cotton Top. Charles Collins, he used to Charles Collins. He used to call Bill Neal Milkman. I guess Bill was, he used to call George Merrill Straw Dog. He used to call Lenny Huff Beaver and Gamble Gams. And he used to call Larry Washington Biscuit. So he had it. So here's a funny story about Larry Washington. So Larry basically didn't read music. And we're doing this one date, and Larry has like 3 pieces of music hanging over the music stand. Now, Larry's basic go-to beat was, could it be I'm falling in love with a baby? And, or, I'm so glad I met you. So Thom goes, Biscuit, what are you doing with that music? You've been playing the same beat for 20 years. Yeah. He says, what are you doing? But that was his go-to thing. And actually, you would call this type of thing a little bit of a gallop. And again, we all steal or imitate. If you listen to the great Ralph McDonald on Just the Two
Oh, yes.
of Us, you'll hear Ralph playing basically that same thing, but on 2 congas and maybe then overdubbing a little bit of a cowbell and a woodblock thing. So, we all sort of like, I think I told you in one of our interviews, James, the tune My Melody, the Nisi Williams. And so that intro goes on. And I said, hey, Thom, I think every other measure, boo-doo, boo-dee-da, ba-dee-da-da. Mr. O'Shea, those wheels are turning. That's what he said to me. Now, where did I get this idea? Lee Ritenour. I don't know if you're familiar with Lee.
Of course. I was just talking about Lee Ritenour earlier today with somebody.
He did a tune called Is It You?
Yes, Is It You? That was a great. He was on the GRP label.
So I always loved that little clave. So, of course, Thom did it. They put a little bit of reverb on it. And, so, again, we all beg, borrow, and steal, we imitate, we analyze, and then we sort of make it our own. And that was the good thing with Thom. Although everything was written out to the point, copied beautifully, like extra parts. And he would say he wrote a very weird timpani part on It's Your Conscience. I think it was on the first Denise Williams album. And it was a marimba thing in 6, pretty large interval, like a Latin thing, like a Brazilian.
You remember it? Can you play it?
No, but I'll play one thing for you. But bam, ba da bum bum ba. I wish I had the part. But in between, he had these timpani hits as if they were like drum fills, and he would say, "Mr. O'Shea, does this work?" I said, "Yeah, Thom." I said, "It's doable on the timpani." It was pretty busy. I felt like I was on a paddle boat because you're changing the pitches of the timpani with the pedals. There's pedals on the kettle drum. So when you press the pedal down, there's a spider mechanism that's going to bring the head up or down. So that's, where you want it. But Thom was very into, orchestral instruments. Thom told me he did not get into the Philadelphia Musical Academy. And I remember he said to me, Mr. O'Shea, I can buy that building now. But he didn't get in. Now, reading some things on Thom, they said he did go to a music school. I don't know if it was maybe Granoff or something in Philly, but he studied all the instruments. For instance, I'll play a couple vibe chords for you.
Okay, do. And you know what I loved about his music? You can hear everything. You can hear oboe. You can hear. That's what I mean by sophistication. Yeah. He brought so much to the table that R&B listeners were not used to. And when you're listening, it's just like, wow. So play something for us.
Well, let's see if you would know this tune. Vanilla. I mean, 2 chords, a minor step.
Right.
Do you have any idea what that is? Now, when I sing,
I wanted to say people make the world go round, but I'm not sure. Nope, not that.
I want to sing the part that you just mentioned.
Okay.
Ba-ba-da-ba-da, ba-ba-da-ba-dee, ba-ba-da-ba-da-dee-da-da.
Oh my God.
Ba-ba-da-ba-da, oboe. Now here's a typical Thom Bell. 2, 3. There was a 5/4 measure there in this, and the artist would come in on beat 3. So, but that typical Thom Bell, you have after these final chords. Then you would have 2, 3, 4, 5. I mean, Thom, but the listener would never know it. Even in the bridge, let me see, maybe I need my old man glasses here, James. In the bridge of that tune, you would have 2, 4. 5/4 measure coming up right here. 5. So Thom threw in, yeah.
For everybody, that's Bet You By Golly Wow, which is, of course, Thom Bell's stylistic one of their big hits. And by the way, one of the things that I love about that song, you talk about Phyllis Hyman. Phyllis Hyman did a cover of that song. New York, Anaje, Alan Gums, rearranged it, and his rearrangement, and with Phyllis Hyman, it was for Norman Connors, was the artist, but is so beautiful. Yeah. Most of the time when you hear Thom's stuff, it's like, please don't copy this, don't do a cover, because you're never going to do it justice. This is one of the ones did it justice. The song is beautiful.
I heard it live when I was out in LA. My friend got me tickets to the Hollywood Bowl, and Philip Bailey sang it. And I called Thom that night. He actually called me the next day at the airport. I said, Thom, I had tears in my eyes. It was so beautiful. Now, you mentioned People Make the World Go Round. Now, there's a tune, like Thom would start that tune with this iconic, he had the wind chimes going. He had like wind chimes. Then you would have like the bass part be. Ding. Now, that was Larry Washington doing what they call a moose call, like a glyph. So, so that went on for 8 measures. And then it's like 2 measures of 4/4. Ba 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 da ba dee da da. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2. And at the end, you could either call it a 6/4 measure, and he used that tune beautiful with the marimba. Now, James, this is a xylophone. The marimba actually sounds an octave lower. So I'll try to play at the end of that tune, like Thom will go like, let me use my cheat sheet here, see if I have it. Thom will use like 1, 3, 4.
Yes.
So actually marimba would be 2, 3, 4, 1. And, in the beginning, when you were having that bass line play, do-dee, Thom would have the marimba play, do-dee, 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 right out of Burt Bacharach. The look, with the guitar playing those chicks, like 1, chick, real dry. Thom used the marimba beautifully. And I'll tell you, one of the things that Thom really put me to the test. Again, we did this Lou Rawls album.
Oh, yeah.
And Thom loved doubling. If you listen to some of those Fish cuts, the Fish that Say Pittsburgh, he loved doubling marimba with the electric bass with Bob Babbitt. And I forget what tune. I think it's Watch Your Back. I said, Thom, can I overdub? Oh, no, Mr. O'Shea, I know you got it in you. I said, can I just, again, it was like in octaves or in 6, like that Latin sound. So Thom really was a beautiful arranger, and where other guys, a lot of the stuff at Philly International, like if you look for The Love of Money, I think that was Freddie Washington played the bass. How did that go, James?
That's the guitar with the flange on it.
I think he was just fooling around now. So and then Gamble and Huff sort of latched onto that, just like one of Thom's engineers. Well, there were 2 of them. A guy named Don Murray, who did all of Lee Ritenour's stuff. Don came back from L.A. to do the Denisi stuff with us in Philly at Sigma. And Jim Gallagher was another guy, and he was telling us that Ronnie Baker, the famous bass player who did I'll Be Around with Thom before Babbitt, he was in the studio one day at Sigma warming up. So he came up with this line. He's just playing.
Oh, my gosh. Harold Melvin and the Blue Notes, bad luck.
So Thom Bell, and they caught on that. And I recorded that live with Blue Magic at the Latin Casino. Yeah, this year.
Whatever the occasion, effortless elegance is right this way. Because Hilton brings you new ways to stay courtesy of the Nomad London. And it doesn't stop at award-winning dining in a space draped in velvet and illuminated by vintage chandeliers. No, this day goes beyond with unparalleled personalized service and attentive hospitality. Oh, and did we mention the Nomad London can be booked using your Hilton Honors points at Hilton.com? Hilton, for the stay.
Brace the runners! Raise the sails! Raise the sails!
Captain, an unidentified ship is approaching. Over.
Roger. Wait, is that an enterprise sales solution?
Reach sales professionals, not professional sailors. With LinkedIn ads, you can target the right people by industry, job title, and more. We'll even give you a $100 credit on your next campaign. Get started today at linkedin.com/results. Terms and conditions apply.
Get into your body's vitals with the Vitals app on Apple Watch.
I wanna get into my body and let my skin do the talking. I wanna feel like I'm myself again.
The Vitals app tracks key overnight metrics so you can spot changes in your health before you feel them. The Vitals app on Apple Watch. iPhone XS or later required. The Vitals app is for wellness purposes only and not for medical use.
Vitamin Water Zero Sugar has great taste, zero BS, and obviously zero sugar. For those with zero room in their calendar, zero patience for slow walkers, those who get 0 hours of sleep on a Saturday night, have zero filter, zero given, and zero interest in grabbing a plain, boring water. Grab a delicious Vitamin Water Zero Sugar today.
I remember that album with Blue Magic, Major Harrison, Margie Joseph.
And I'm up there somewhere, a young Ed Shea with brown hair. But the conductor of this whole thing.
Hold that up for a moment. Just hold it up. Oh, there you go.
Let me see. I'm up there on the I'm up there on the percussion riser.
Wow.
Yeah. And the drummer on that was a guy I don't know what his last name was. They called him Fat Larry. He had a band in Philly. Played his butt off, and he died at a young age. But it was Vince Montana that left, and they formed their own label called WMOT. And
yes.
They did that album, and it was great. Again, it was live at the Latin. We were young guys, 25 years old.
What is the album you have in back of you? The gold album you have in back of you?
This
on Philly Groove
is
label.
DOJ's Identify. This was, I'm giving away my age with the gold 45, right, James? This was the Jones Girls. I did this.
Oh, yeah.
To Joe Jefferson. Over here, you can't see, was Teddy Pendergast.
Which one with Teddy? Were you on Close the Door? Were you on the record?
I think that's the album that I overdubbed something for. I guess it was Gams. I don't know. Let me see here.
Let me tell you that Life is a Song Worth Singing is that Teddy Pendergrass album. And the arrangements that Thom Bell did on that album are beyond belief wonderful. When you listen to
the gold record, James, it's Close the Door.
Close the Door. Yeah. The arrangement on that.
Yeah.
So you played on Close the Door.
I did overdubbing on about 3 tunes. I'd have to look. Yeah, I played.
Okay, that album, those arrangements are insanely incredible.
And Teddy was there when I was overdubbing. He looked like he was right out of GQ. Beautiful suit and a real gentleman, real soft-spoken guy. You know, he was originally the drummer for Howard Melvin and the Blue Notes.
And the Blue Notes, yes.
Yeah.
And one of their personnel changes, they went through a few before it was Teddy.
Yeah.
And his vocals. Now here's something. You talked about chess earlier. If you listen to Teddy Pendergrass and you go back and you listen to the lead singer from the Dells, you're going to hear a really very, very close similarity in style and tone between the two of them.
Yeah, I agree with you. Yeah, he was a sweetheart. And back here is Patti LaBelle. I did something with Patti.
Oh, you did something?
With a wonderful producer, a guy by the name of Cecil Womack, Bobby's brother.
Yes.
Cecil and his wife, Linda. Oh, my God, they treated me so nice. I went in. I forget what they had me do, maybe Vibes and Shaker or something. I mean, it's the only time I ever worked with them. Wonderful people. Wonderful, wonderful guy. And I don't know if he's still alive. I don't know what he's doing. But, you know, I worked with a lot of producers. And there were other producers like Bobby Martin, Vince Montana, Jack Faith, a sax player who did the theaters in Philly and weddings and bar mitzvahs. I mean, that's Jack you were hearing playing alto on Me and Mrs. Jones. Me and Mrs. Jones. But, and again, that's almost like a big band thing. That was Gamble and Huff, you know. But I think the downfall of Philly International, from what I read, there was a book that was out called House on Fire, which is out of print now. I think Gamble and Huff put all their energies into Teddy, and they let the other people go away. That's why McFadden and Whitehead wrote "Ain't No Stopping Us." That was sort of their tune, saying, "Hey, man, we're out of here." You know, because Berry Gordy would never see arrangers on any Berry Gordy stuff arranged by.
It was all the corporation.
You know, he didn't want anybody stealing his guys. And of course, that will change. I think it was, who was the guy that did What's Going On? Marvin Gaye.
Marvin Gaye, yeah.
Marvin says, no, man, you got to put arranged by. But he was where Tom and these guys, it's a different era. You know, we get credit. And, but the other producers out of Philly, like say Jack Faith, Richie Wrong, let me see if I have the names down. Well, of course, Bobby Martin, Jack Faith. Yeah, these guys all participated and were great guys. And I just don't want to miss anybody of the rhythm section. Bob Babbitt, you know, Bob came from Detroit, you know, and Bob on Rainy Night in Georgia.
Yes.
Sealed and Delivered. And I'll tell you my Dick Clark story because I mentioned it to you the other day when you mentioned Chubby. So I'm at the Latin Casino, and it was the first show. I think I just worked the whole summer in Wildwood, New Jersey at the Surf Club. We did like a little review, you know. So it's now September. The Latin Casino is starting its season 7 nights a week from September to like Memorial Day. Dick Clark Rock and Roll Review. It's like, like the Coasters, and I think a guy named Chuck Jackson and Jackie Wilson. So we rehearsed Jackie Wilson. I think I rehearsed one other act, and the contractor goes, "Hey, again, this was another gruff guy. Call it Shea. You're done till 8 o'clock." So I figured, well, the other 3 acts have their drummer. I go back to Philly. I cross the bridge. The Tacony Bridge from Cherry Hill to Philly was a nickel at the time. A nickel. What are we paying? $18 at the tunnel now? So I go back, and I figure I'll take a nap. I had dinner. I get back to the Latin Casino around 7 o'clock for an 8 o'clock show. Contractor calls me, and they want to fire you. Dick Clark wants to fire you. I said, why? He says, well, you weren't here for the rest of the rehearsal. I said, well, you told me to go home. So I talked to, and the other drummers probably couldn't read. They didn't want to cover this other act, whoever it was, I forget. So I talked it over with his MD. I played the show. There was no problem. Dick Clark came up and apologized to me. He was a sweetheart. He actually said, I'm really sorry. He says, I really thought, of course, that I think was the first show. I think the second show is when Jackie Wilson hit the floor like a ton of bricks. And we didn't know because he was Mr. Excitement. He's doing splits and you know, and so I was the last drummer to play with Jackie. So I think that was September of '75. And the poor soul, I think, was in a coma for years, James.
Years, exactly.
Yeah. So
well, we only have a few minutes left, and I want to spend the time talking about your memories of Thom. You spoke with him before he passed away.
Yes. And I think I sent you the last voicemail, a bunch of gibberish. Yeah, I talked to Thom, and he'd always say, Mr. O'Shea, get that stick bag ready. Now, the last time I worked with Thom, we did a great tune with James Ingram for the movie City Slickers. Where Did My Heart Go? On the credit roll. So if you see City Slickers 1 and you hear that James Ingram, that's me playing timpani. James, there's 30 guys in LA that could have played this part. He flew me out to do it, put me up in Studio City. So this is the type of guy Thom was. He was loyal. So Charles Collins was on it. The great Marcus Miller played bass on that one because he was out there. He was producing Luther Vandross at the time. And so Thom was like Johnny Mathis. There was no ego. There was no this or that, like I did this. He just was one of the guys, and he took me under his wing, and I'm just so honored that. It's funny, last night Mary and I watching TV, Campbell's Soup ad. I'll be around. I said, man, it's like Thom Bell. You know, his music, like you say, is timeless. like a lot of the other hits. And he took such good care of us, paying us double scale. Listen, I would have worked it for nothing. Somebody says, "Hey, you want to do a Thom Bell session?" Yeah, it wasn't like how much. It's like, what time do you want me there? So Thom, he took me into his home up in Bellingham. I met his wife, Vanessa. Just a beautiful family man. Just a wonderful human being, the type of guy that you would want as a friend, James. I mean, it was, and all the guys were, Kenny Gamble and Leon Huff. Everybody was different in their own way, but I just had this connection with Thom because we would do a triple session, like 10 to 1, 2 to 5, 6 to 9. So you're there like 9 hours and having dinner and hearing the stories. And like George Merrill was telling me, the first date he did on the Denise Williams album, Thom says, "Come on, I'm going to take you for your first Philly cheesesteak." So George was telling me the other day, Thom says, "Look, you got to walk this way that you don't get mugged in Philly." So Thom, Thom was like George Jefferson, like the short guy. But Thom, man, you got to walk this. You don't want to get mugged down here in Philly. So he was just a fun guy to be around, and we just had a great time in the studio. There was never any, "Hey, come on, guys. If something didn't work, it was like, yeah, did I write something that doesn't work? Is it awkward on the instrument?" He was a caring, loving human being, and I wish everybody in the world could be like Thom and Johnny Mathis. And again, like yourself, James, I hear you every day that I can on the radio. If there's a discrepancy in a political thing, you listen to both sides. I mean, you can meet halfway, and that's what's will get us by in the world. It's just like if a conductor on Broadway gives me a note and I think this is ridiculous, I'm not going to debate it. I'm just going to say, look, I'll try to address the issue and do whatever. You want more timpani? Fine, I'll give it to you. No matter how loud I think it is. I just try to be a team player and a good guy, And like I said, I'm blessed at 75 to still be doing this beautiful thing of playing music. And I have a great home life with my partner, Mary, who's a terrific violist and does a lot of the Johnny Mathis jobs with me in the area, So we're blessed, James. I mean...
Well, man, I am blessed to have you as a friend. And I am really blessed. It really, I'm a little sentimental, so yeah. I don't want to break out crying, but I'm going to tell you something. I so look forward to this, Ed. From the first time we talked, it was just like, it was there. It was in the heart, man. And so this is just fabulous. We're going to do it again because we've got a lot more to talk about. This just is great. But you're here for our first video podcast, and I'm so happy it's you.
Well, we'll take you out with that.
James Golden. Everything is golden. Ed Shea.
I'm honored to be here with you. And like I said, I just can't believe I can remember moving to New York with my station loaded up with a set of vibes and a xylophone, moving to Washington Heights at 190th and Fort Washington. Fast forward 30-some years later, I'm on WABC radio. It's a great journey if you just let life take its path and try to adjust to different situations. That's what I can leave your listeners with, that, you had the journey, you had those great years. And believe me, when I used to drive around when I was living in South Jersey and think, who in the hell is Bo Snerdley? Who would name their kid Bo Snerdley? Mr. Snerdley. And I said to Mary, I said, here I am talking to James like we're the best of friends, like we've known each other. And to be in the company of I remember when you interviewed George Benson and Omar Hakim. Not that I'm even on that, but
yes, you are, man. We're all together.
I mean,
we all love it.
Yeah.
We all love what comes from our creator. That's the music.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Well, James, thank you. And anytime you want to do it again, and I hope you don't mind when I'm listening, I send you a text saying, hey, blah, blah, blah.
I love it. I love it. It's always good. Thank you, Ed.
Thank you, James. Be well, my friend. God bless.
God bless you, too.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
This is your before and after story, where your first steps towards a new life-changing career begin. Southeastern College can take you there. We offer in-demand hybrid and online programs with hands-on training, led by in-field career professionals, and career services to put you on the path to a rewarding and fulfilling future. This is where your transformation begins. Southeastern College, your future is bright. Visit sec.edu to get started.